So I'm excited to be with this panel. We've had a chance to talk beforehand. And we're going to take a slightly different perspective on this than Jay's panel earlier. So we have Gary Campbell of Gilbert Campbell Real Estate. We have Dean Lamott from E-Ink, who's been a great partner in terms of helping connect the workforce, our students, to his company as well as the resources. We have Tim Thompson from Marcus and Millichamp, who's going to talk a bit about the finance perspective on this. We have my friend John Power from Farley White, and we've done lots of plotting together. And my new friend, Lynn Bora from Wynn Residential. So what I thought I would start this off is I would ask each of them to just tell a little bit about what they do within their respective companies, and then answer one question. And we'll start with just one question. Why north of Boston?
Great, thank you. First of all, Steve, I consider you a friend too. I know you didn't mention it there, but no, I'm just kidding. We own and manage apartments, so multifamily in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. It's a family business, been around for about 60 years, and I'm the CEO. So it's as I say, part of the family business. In addition to that, I'm co-chair of the Lowell Plan along with John. Lowell Plan is an economic development nonprofit that works to try to bring new developments to Lowell. So I've been very involved with that. And I've also just finishing up a term as president of the State Home Builders Association, which has been interesting. And also very involved in the National Association of Home Builders. And in fact, we just had our mid-year board meeting last week. So that's it.
So why north of Boston?
Well, I think a couple of things. First of all, the theme from the earlier panel is that there's clearly more ability to cooperate with municipalities. I mean, I'm seeing this tremendous spirit partnership between businesses and towns and cities, and I think that's a huge benefit. I know in the case of Lowell, people in the Lowell Department of Planning and Development want to work with companies that come in, and they'll go the extra mile to try to lure people in. So that's one factor. Traffic is another one. I'm trying not to be a curmudgeon, get off of my lawn kind of person, but I mean the traffic just seems to be getting worse and worse as time goes by. I think that's a data-driven observation. I don't think that's just anecdotal. So that's another aspect. I don't know how people can go into Boston every day. It's crazy. So that's another aspect of it. And I think cost. I mean, Boston. There's so much going on in Boston now. It's quite expensive to lease office space. So for certain aspects of companies that are growing, you need to be in Boston for a lot of different reasons. But then there are other parts of the operation that you don't. And I think that the ability to kind of create integration, especially on the transportation side, between some of the municipalities north of Boston and Boston is really critical. So all those factors.
Excellent. Thanks, Gary. Dean, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. So, Senior Director of Finance at E-Ink, and so why am I involved in this, with this organization? Sometimes timing is everything. And when the Middlesex 3 Coalition had their opening, they're going to kick off meeting, was the same time E-Ink was moving from Cambridge to Billerica. So I was asked to sit on a panel with a gentleman from Keurig, with former Secretary Bielecki. And it was, some of the questions I fielded at that time were, why Billerica? Why did you get out of the city? And, one was as E-Ink was growing, we found a lot of response from candidates who did not come to E-Ink because of the commute into Cambridge. And so with a startup company, you wear many hats. So I was on the project team that was selecting a new site because we were outgrowing our space in Cambridge. And the fact that I live in southern New Hampshire has nothing to do with why we don't. So why north of Boston? It was a number of reasons. One was at that time in 2011 and 2012, as offices were being kind of remade or upscaled, cost was going to be 3x when we were at the end of our lease. So there was a significant cost concern. The second was space. We needed the ability. It was shortly after Amazon launched the Kindle where E-Ink grew 300% like 5 years in a row. So we needed to grow. not just to house what we thought our growth was going to be, but have on that. And we right here in Billerica, right inside Technology Park here, where we can essentially quadruple the size of our current 140,000 square foot space. Working with the town of Billerica, kind of rolled out the red carpet for E-Ink. And lastly, location. We had a lot of employees that did not even own cars. We were a spin out of the MIT lab. We had about 30 out of 70 people that were in the city, and we started a shuttle program back then. And the goal was not lose one person due to transportation. And that shuttle has now grown into the Middlesex 3 Coalition, TMA. So that same shuttle that E-Ink privately funded is now a significant reason why we didn't lose one of those people to transportation. So it was a combination of all of those factors as why we came north. So, thank you.
And TMA is the Transportation Management Association, for those of you that might be wondering. Tim, I'm guessing you'll come at this from a little different perspective.
Sure, yeah, great. Can people, am I on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Tim Thompson, Marcus and Millichap, and so what we are, our company is a broker of investment, commercial investment real estate. I run the Boston operations for the company. What we're known for, we have 80 offices around the country. Our local office is in Boston. And what we're known for, we're the largest broker of single tenant net lease properties in the entire country. But we got our start in the Bay Area as apartment brokers. And we have office, industrial, hospitality, self-storage specializations as well. So why north of the city? So what I can say there, I can't see the screen, but there may be a slide pulled up on the screen, which like 50% of the room can see. And anyways, the slide speaks to investor yield. So my answer to the question is suburbs in general, investors are coming from inside the city where cap rates are extremely compressed and looking for areas outside the city. And I think, as these other two guys said, a combination of good location at the intersection, Burlington, for example, intersection of 128 and Route 3, combined with favorable zoning and participation from municipalities is a reason that the north specifically is attractive to investors who are leaving the city to chase yield.
Thanks, Tim. I want to come back to that. We want to pick that apart a little more, so we're going to come back to that question. John.
So I'm John Power. I'm with Farley White Interest, and we are a commercial investment and development company. We own properties from Boston to Manchester, and recently have spent a little bit of time down in Southwest Florida. But our primary focus of all of our real estate investment has been in the Billerica, Chelmsford, Lowell market. And so I've spent a lot of time, over 25 years actually. I was one of the guys who helped sell those small buildings at the intersection of Route 495 and Route 3 called Cross Point now, and used to be called the Wang Towers. And the reason why we have invested here is very much the story of Cross Point. There's a resilience in this community. There's an ability, the workforce that is here along this Route 3 corridor is unique in its ability to adapt. And being able to adapt is critical. I mean, Steve will tell you that, when you look at innovation is really the hallmark of how do we adapt to finding out new ways to do things. And this workforce, this group of people that have been here for a long time, have adapted to numerous different technologies, from Wang's mini computer to where we are today. And that has allowed E-Ink. That has allowed the employers here to be able to hire a good workforce, and for a commercial real estate perspective, that's sort of a home run.
Great. Thanks, John. And Lynn.
Hi. I'm not on either. Am I on? Hi. I think it just falls off as you get to the end of the table. Good morning. My name is Lynn Bora. I'm with Wynn Residential. I hold many hats within the organization, but I think relative to where we are today, I work with our development teams in helping to identify locations where we want to grow our multifamily footprint. We've been in this market for a couple of decades now, actually. We found an opportunity in Lowell to take some of the most spectacular buildings that existed in the mills and apply an adaptive reuse program and create some of the most fabulous housing that the city of Lowell has seen in a very long time. And we continue to do that. We currently have 9 communities in Lowell, 3 of which we own, and we are continuing conversations around the Hamilton Canal District in our efforts and hopes to partner with the city to continue to develop that area, which is adjacent to the new courthouse that's being built. We have great partnerships. I heard earlier today about the importance of partnerships with the economic development committees and the communities, and I think we are the third leg on that 3-legged stool where we talk about work, live, and play. Where the live piece of the ability to attract businesses to this particular area. We want to provide quality housing for you as developers of business and to help enhance this particular area along Route 3.
Great, thank you. Lynn, I want to actually circle back to you, because I know as we were talking, I remember a few years ago, Wynn actually relocated 125 employees up to Lowell.
We
So
did.
what was the driver behind that?
Many of you may know our headquarters are in Faneuil Hall, which is really cool and wonderful and small. So I think as we started to stack people up and, people were sharing desks, it was primarily driven by the fact that we had grown and we had run out of space. But as I mentioned, the space that we took over for housing also afforded us an opportunity to think about bringing some of our workforce into the marketplace. We talk a lot about the transportation. We relocated our entire national accounting team up to Lowell, to the Boot Mills campus, which represents about 500 residential units and several 100,000 square feet of commercial space. And it gave people back their lives. I think when you think about the majority of the folks that were working in our accounting departments were located either in the city or just north of the city, and we evaluated the impact that was going to have on our workforce, and realized that by taking people off the road and allowing them to work a little bit closer to where they lived, it would have a very positive impact on that. The cost factor associated, somebody mentioned the cost associated with expanding in Boston versus expanding up in this area was certainly a driver. And it allowed us to create some really cool space that people spoke about this morning where people want to work that we couldn't do by the constraints of, a real urban environment.
Thank you. So I don't know how many of you, have any of you been to Boarding House Park? They have a wonderful summer music series. Peter Cetera from Chicago is playing Saturday night. Tickets are still available if you're interested. But what's interesting about that area, that neighborhood, is Wynn you relocated the accounting finance group in there. There's also Wynn Residential. But John, you have a facility in that group as well.
Yes, we do.
Why don't you talk a little bit about what you got going on in there with the startups and such? So
we acquired one of the office portions of the Boot Mill complex, and the interesting part about that, I'm going to sort of slide a teeny bit. I'll take one quick second, but one of the things that people forget about is that history is a big determinant of what happens in a lot of our worlds. The Lynn's buildings, my buildings, those buildings were built prior to the advent of electricity. We're talking about mid-1800s and earlier, and the Boot Mill is actually sort of it's the poster child for historic renovations. It's magnificent, but they're narrow buildings, and so what they do is they create very light and bright space, and it's given us an ability to put in an infrastructure of life sciences as well as technology, software technology sciences into the space where people are occupying offices on the interior, and the exterior of the buildings have a lot of the technical space. And that distance becomes very narrow, so people don't feel like they're in the interior in a dark spot. So the space ends up being very light and bright, and that's been a very successful transformation on a number of the mills up in Lowell.
Great, thank you. Now, since I did snub Gary earlier, I figure I'd better come back with a question for him here. So, Gary, I know you just returned from the National Builders Association conference. Was that in Vegas?
Portland, Oregon.
Portland, Oregon. Oh, very nice this time of year. So, what did you take away from that? How does Middlesex 3, what we're doing here, fit into this national scene?
Well, I mean, a couple of quick, kind of immediate takeaways were that it's becoming very difficult on the cost side to build housing. So there's Canadian softwood lumber tariffs been imposed by the Trump administration, 15%, and somehow that's resulted in lumber prices going up like 60%. And everyone's wondering how that's possible.
New math.
New math, or collusion, one of the two. The lumber companies, the lumber companies are taking advantage of the situation effectively. So anyway, you've got that, and you get this tremendous labor shortage on the construction side. It's very difficult. In fact, Massachusetts has one of the highest construction labor shortages in the country. I was just reading about that the other day. So that's interesting. So those are the short-term things. So supply has been very constrained. Land prices are going up. So housing is becoming more and more difficult to build, even though we are not nearly at the rate at which we need to build housing as the population grows. It's historically much lower, 50% lower than you normally see. You're still finding these constraints. But then in the bigger picture issue is that no one knows what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years with millennials. So, home ownership is at a historic low right now. It's starting to tick back up a little bit. Millennials are starting to get into the home ownership market a little bit, but no one really knows, how much that will happen as they get older and, get out into the housing market. So I have 3 millennial children. When you're 24, you don't mind having 3 roommates living in Boston or Brookline or wherever, Lexington. Because you can kind of share it. Now, if you're 32 and you're married and have a small child at home, you don't want 3 roommates. So clearly, we're going to have to do something to house folks as they get older. Now, millennials are showing that they're going to get married later in life, potentially start families later in life, and they're going to want different things from their housing than maybe historically has been the case. So they want to be near mass transit, potentially. They want to have trails and be able to go outside and be able to walk everywhere as much as they can. So this is the big conundrum. This is the big unknown in the housing world. But to me, it's an opportunity for north of Boston because it's, as I say, at some point, not everybody's going to be able to live in Boston. Rents are very high. It's $4,000 or $5,000 a month to rent an apartment, and that's not even particularly nice apartment sometimes. So what's going to happen to those folks? So they need housing. That old saying from Wayne Gretzky is, you don't skate to where the puck is, you skate to where the puck is going to be. If you look ahead, then you've got to figure out a way, to either provide, home ownership, home rentals, which are townhome rentals or single home family rentals, because that's a kind of happening thing now. So you've got that going on. And then, when you look at tax reform, one of the things that maybe people don't understand about tax reform is that it doubled the standard deduction. So for the average person, owning a house no longer has much in the way of economic benefit, except for capital appreciation. So you don't get much tax benefit from it because, you're not even going to be itemizing for the most part. So that reckons that, a big percentage of people who were itemizing before will no longer do that. So some of the tax benefits of home ownership is going away. Prices are going up, interest rates are going up a little bit, so you've got significant headwinds. But there's an opportunity, for the suburbs to really lure those millennials out as they get older.
So you'll notice we're kind of twisting and weaving in between residential and commercial. They're very much related in our region. So Tim, I want to turn to you. So it's interesting because I never really thought a lot about the investment groups that drove some of the commercial properties I've been involved in until we had to negotiate the lease. And then suddenly it became really apparent we had to think about all this. So maybe if you could talk a little bit about what you're seeing, what is from an investment perspective, what's the value, and how does this mix, commercial residential mix, work?
So I'm going to stick with the theme of the apartments and the underlying demand. And so, basically what we saw in the 70s was 71% of households were in the suburbs, and then in the 80s it was 79%, and in the 90s it was 69%. So it's kind of this 10% fluctuation back and forth. Right now, between 2010 and 2015, we're 71%. So we expect it to shift back up toward 80%. And the reason for this, there's a couple of things behind this. So family formation, if you think about in 1970, the average age of a first-time mother was 21.4. 2000, 24.9. In 2015, 26.4. So this is later in life, these millennials are expected to have children and start households. And that was somewhat perpetuated by financial crisis in 2008. I know a lot of millennial, the older end of the spectrum postponed household formation on purpose. And so anyways, the better schools are typically in the suburbs, and so we're expecting the millennials, as that demographic ages, to move out to the suburbs. And so that should strengthen the underlying fundamentals of those suburbs.
So we should be investing in the REITs right now, and real estate trusts.
Invest in the suburbs.
Okay. All right, thank you. Dean, I want to circle back. So you talked a little bit about that move from Boston Cambridge up to Billerica and the challenges that you face then. Looking forward, you talk about you have this facility, you have this room to grow. What do you need to do that? What are the pieces that need to be in place in terms of the actual physical construction, but also in terms of the workforce?
Yeah, I would say one of our biggest challenges right now, we've talked a lot about millennials, we've talked a lot about amenities. What are the things as a corporation that we can do, not just to attract employees? I think E-Inc., when you learn when you understand our technology and what our potential applications are, the company sells itself to potential candidates. It's how do we retain these? How do we retain our employees afterwards? And we talk about this, work balance, life. We talk about amenities, and there's some comments made at the first panel about, bringing, eye doctors to your office. What can we bring to our office to, just make it easier for people to, make it easier for our employees, basically, to not have to leave, to be able to hit a gym facility, plenty of food options, whether it's Avanti Market and fresh foods to, your 3 o'clock Snickers bar to, what can we offer as a company, and to make it more exciting for employees. We've had consultants come in and talk to us specifically about this 24 to 34-year-old population and what we can do. We just repurposed 20,000 square feet of our office just to put in an open, collaborative lounge, chairs, high top tables where people can just set their laptop down and collaborate. We're an innovation center. It's what we do. And what are those things that we can do to make it more enticing for our employees to stay long term? We have a significant core group that has been with the company. I've been with the company 12 years now, and I can't believe it's been that long, but it seems like it was just yesterday. And we have a growing population of 24 to 32-year-olds. So understanding that generation has been a challenge for many of our for many of my colleagues. So as a company, that's what can we do as a company to retain and to retain our employees. We have about a dozen employees that recently bought condos or most recently bought a house about a week ago within a mile from our office. These individuals, in talking with them, they don't want to drive. They want access to everything. I mean, talking with the town, I can't reemphasize or emphasize enough having that relationship, as it was shared on the first panel, having that relationship with the town and, being involved in, what's important to companies, getting, kind of on-campus type housing with restaurants and in the amenities where they don't have to go anywhere. So those are the challenges that we're facing.
Okay, good. Lynn, did you want to add?
I did.
Yep, that works perfect.
Just to expand on that relative to the multi-housing piece, in order for us to attract those coming out of the city where communities have been built specifically with all of those amenities outside their door, we do have to think about how we design our space to accomplish and accommodate all of those pieces as well. In the 70s and 80s, when we were building buildings, we were pouring foundations and putting up 3-story walk-up buildings in vast green space, and they came. Today, we're doing podium build with parking and retail and some commercial, and really applying a mixed-use application so that it more closely mirrors what they've been experiencing some of the cities. And I think that's going to make it appealing for folks to leave.
Yeah, it's got to be a live, work, play sort of a deal. And it's prohibitive to build in the cities right now. You know, I have clients who are spending $500 per square foot to build steel frame construction in the city. You know, and that results in some of these, you know, $5 or $6 rents. And you know, I think there are more affordable options in the suburbs right now.
I want to go back to Lynn and John on this. Lynn, earlier you mentioned about the interest in the Hamilton Canal District, and John, we've talked about what is it about that area that is attractive, besides the innovation hub that I helped open there?
Well, without question, the most interesting is the innovation hub. No question at all. That's all I need to say. One of the things that is interesting in as you look at the corridor, and notice that a lot of the activity sits around density pockets. You know, you look at Bedford. There's, in the prior panel, there was the conversations about Bedford and about Burlington and about the density here in Billerica, especially on both sides of Route 3 in this location along Concord Road. Lowell as a city has an opportunity with a very large, I think it's about 13 acres. It's 12 to 13 acres of land to design a modern environment that can provide both density and appropriate green space, outdoor space. And so that, I think, is where the intriguing part of the Hamilton Canal is. And candidly, one of the greatest assets in that city, for anyone who hasn't been there, you should see it, is the canals that were built years and years ago specifically for industrial purposes to produce power, but today really add a very different lifestyle and add a beautiful environment when you're walking around it. And Lynn, you might want to add. I guess Lynn's okay.
No, I think, as I mentioned, we love Lowell. We have a couple of buildings adjacent to that parcel, so it made sense for us. I think we had been involved in it from a larger perspective a while back, and then have decided to approach just the multifamily mixed-use piece of it. The approach that we're taking with it is we have a number of different programs for residents in the area within our communities, and this one itself will be structured to provide affordable housing for many different people, not your traditional affordable housing piece, but to introduce what is being defined in the state and across the country as workforce housing for those folks who want to remain in their communities, who may be priced out of an affordable program and can't afford the more traditional market rents that we see continue to escalate. So our plan within this particular one is to really create a variety of program types, allowing everybody to remain close to their current neighborhoods and where they work and in the city of Lowell, which, again, we love.
Great. Did you want to add?
Well, I just wanted to make a point about Hamilton Canal, which is truly one of the premier potential development sites in New England, I would describe. So anybody here interested, please step forward. But the challenge will be is that Wynn is one of the foremost companies in the country when it comes to doing what they do. They're absolutely brilliant at it and have grown the company substantially. And they've had a lot of success in Lowell. But on the residential side, there are a lot of federal tax incentives that go along with either building or rehabbing a property. So there's low-income tax credits, there's historic tax credits, there's tax-exempt bonds, there's a number of other potential incentives out there. Those programs don't exist so easily on the commercial side. So if you're trying to build new, there's going to be a delta. So it costs X amount to build new, and you're going to get Y in rent. How do you fill that delta? There are no easy answers. Again, tax reform has brought forward this idea called an opportunity zone, and Hamilton Canal isn't an opportunity zone, so there are some tax advantages there. But it's trying to put a package together is more challenging.
And even on the residential side, there are a lack of programs in the middle. It's easy to build the luxury stuff, right? Because you pay a lot for the land and you pay a lot to build it, and there are programs available for the affordable. but maybe Lynn can speak to what's the, what tools are available to developers for the middle to provide that workforce housing.
As far as the tax credit opportunities? I mean, I can't speak to the components around that. Certainly there is an incentive to provide that. I think we all acknowledge the fact that there are programs for those 30% of AMI folks, and the market rate, you build it, they will come environment. And I think as a, the legislator and the government is recognizing the fact that we're missing that middle opportunity. Where do those folks go to live that want to remain in those communities? So the specifics around the tax credit opportunities that have afforded Win, I know they exist, but specifics I don't have.
Now, I would be remiss, because I know we have the board members from Middlesex 3 from the surrounding towns in the region here. So I do want to think, so a challenge, I'll share a challenge I have. I didn't prep them with this question, so put on your thinking caps on this one. So a challenge I face in Lowell, we're in Lowell, we work very closely with the city of Lowell, we have our buildings in there, and they want all of those startups to stay in Lowell. But my guess is that folks in Burlington and Billerica and Bedford and Tingsboro would like us to share some of that economic wealth. So what are the connections that we need to make between the towns along Route 3 and Middlesex 3 and what's happening up in Lowell? And I would also, I think of Burlington in many respects as having a nice big boom as well that we'd like to share northward. I think Tingsboro could probably use some of that. So I live in Tingsboro, so I worry about these things.
I'll take this just because it dovetails into another part. All of you that have businesses that live in along the Route 3 area should recognize that that real estate is a momentum game. I don't care what anybody tells you. It's just a flat-out fact, okay? Verizon is going to go to the North Station. They're not going to the Innovation District all the way at the other end of town. And they're going to pay, you ready? They're going to pay $70 a foot. It's going to go up by 3% a year for the next 15 years, and that's triple net, okay? So that's $100 a foot. So, they're paying enormous amounts of rent to go to this location. And part of it is because Boston has a lot of momentum. Why does Boston have a lot of momentum? It's the government. There have been programs for years that have tried to stimulate urban development, okay? One of the things that's important is you should all talk to people like Jay Ash. He left, but talk to Jay Ash. He gets it.
He's very accessible.
Right, and he is accessible, yeah. And he gets it. And there needs to be, these communities along the Route 3 area need to talk to their state reps, need to talk to their local officials. They need to work together as an organized group, because one of the things that happens is as you start to gain that momentum back, okay, as you start to have people flow to a different area, you'll be amazed at how powerful that can really be. And there are a lot of programs, both from a transportation infrastructure improvement. I know that as a prior ad, Stephanie Cronin was in the last Middlesex 3 meeting, and she talked about improvements to transportation along this area. Those are the kinds of things that will make a big difference. And the money is going to go somewhere, people. It's going to go to Quincy. It's going to go to Marlboro. It's going to go to Route 3. Where's it going to go? So everyone should be advocating to help all of the communities along the stretch. And I think, Steve, that's a very good question.
Great.
Anyone else want the mic?
Any other?
I mean, I can't top that. But speaking to momentum,
Advocate for the funding.
but speaking to momentum, there's a ton of momentum in Burlington right now. I mean, you've got the district, you've got 3rd Ave, and there are hotels, and there's just a ton of stuff going on. So I don't know, but to build off of that momentum seems like that's a good start.
I know we have a few minutes left. We wanted to open it up for questions. So do folks have any questions for this esteemed and engaged panel? I'm looking around. Any softball questions on the side of the room? Okay, well, if you do think of one, let us know. So we're coming in. We have about 6-7 minutes left here. So I did want to touch on. So I'll, for those of you that don't know me, I seem like a very collaborative guy, but I also have a competitive side. And so when we started the medical device incubator in 2007, one of my goals was to pry the companies out of Cambridge, right? I was so sick and tired. Anyone from Cambridge Innovation Center here? Greentown. I was so sick and tired about hearing about, oh, Greentown Labs is doing this, oh, Cambridge Innovation Center is doing this, oh, MIT is doing this. That's great, but it wasn't helping us up in our region. So that's where my competitive side. And over the years, it took us a few years to do it. We created the facilities, the connections, the networks that not only drew those 60 companies to Lowell, but also drew Johnson & Johnson. Johnson & Johnson named M2D2 one of 8 innovation labs in the country, and they fund it, right? We've got Boston Scientific, we've got these other companies. So from my perspective, that's a success. So, I mean, Dean, you all made the move. You're happy with what you're seeing. How do we get some of those other companies? Why is Amazon looking somewhere else? Why are these companies looking at other places?
Our relationship with, UMass Lowell, we most recently had a global summit on campus. Our involvement, we actually have space at on Milk Street in the Cambridge Innovation Center. So we're very connected to that, that startup environment. And access to, there was talk about 50 or 60 interns that one of the panelists mentioned earlier. Yeah, that's an important part of our, program as well. Access to this talent pool, access to the universities, access and work with, people like yourself in the, UMass Lowell. So those are all of the, in addition to just the space and the growth opportunities from a facility perspective, but those are the things that really have been important to E-Ink, is having those relationships with all local, from Middlesex 3 College and different education and training opportunities. We still have very close ties with MIT. Obviously, we're a spin out of their lab. So, that's what would attract these companies to this area, is access and building those relationships. I mean, as a material and display, technology company, getting involved with startups at an early age and having them see value in the products that we offer can help them create value for their own products down the road. So getting those relationships and building the foundation to move forward, those are the reasons that would attract, companies out of
Great. Gary mentioned the Lowell plan, and there's also the Lowell Development Finance Corps. And one of the things that they did with us, once they saw the success of the medical device incubator and the innovation hub, they came to us one day and they said, Steve, we want to start a loan fund. We want to start a fund that will encourage companies to stay in Lowell when they graduate. And we had a quick conversation. They worked with the area banks, and I would say in about a week and a half, they raised $1 million. They have the money in a pool, and startups that we vet, so they've already been vetted, they're raising money, they're a good bet, are actually granted a $100,000 loan, 3% interest, no payments the first year, with no collateral, frankly. It's a risky loan for the bank, but they trust us a bit. I worry about this one a little bit. But it encourages these companies to come and stay in the region. And then they can use it to fit out a space or to get some equipment. They can do the things they need to take the next step. And what was impressive about that is people saw what we were doing, came to us and said, we want to help you keep these folks here. So I think, to Dean's point, we've got the education, we've got the workforce talent, we have lots of spaces. I love this building. I wish I had a project to move into it. I don't right now. I might in a couple months. We'll see. There's other types of incentives. So the financial incentives, whether they come from the government, they come from the private sector, are really important in pulling this all together. So.
Yes, one of the strengths that Lowell has is there are a number of community banks, I think, including Enterprise Bank, who's here as a sponsor, who really step up to the plate always. They're involved with the Lowell plan. They're heavy contributors to the LDFC. And it's kind of a unique partnership where everyone can sit around the table and really think about how to move the needle on economic development in Lowell. So, yeah.
Yep, John. Sure. You killed another one?
No, I think somebody took it. Yeah, somebody was trying to quiet me down. Anyway, pardon me. One thing that I don't know whether, I did talk a little bit about momentum. And, a lot of times, I don't know how many of you actually focused on life sciences, biotech 15, 20 years ago when there were a whole bunch of little small life sciences companies that were going broke left, right, and center. And today, Cambridge is I've heard people say that Cambridge, the CEO of Novartis was at a conference that I was at, and he said if you're not in Cambridge and you're a life sciences company, you aren't serious about your business, globally. Now, let me tell you something. And I know this because they actually they used to occupy part of one of the buildings we own, but they left. But UMass Robotics. So the momentum thing goes to the next. Right? It's like what Gary said, like where the puck's going to be. Where's the next technology? Where's the next movement? And one of the areas that next technology is going to move in is into the robotic space. UMass has a fabulous robotic space. So there was NASA went out. NASA's sending a robot to Mars. Okay, this robot is as big as anyone in this room. Okay, it can walk, it can talk, it can look at you, it moves its arms, it has arms, legs, and everything else. Okay, they have to send this robot to Mars. It's going to cost billions of dollars to do this. All right, as part of a research project. So they went around to the United States and they said, we need to find technology institutions that can help us design, test, and implement this robot. Okay, and we're going to find 2 of them. Well, they ended up at MIT. There's a surprise, right? And they ended up at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. And Valkyrie sat in our building for a while. This is why I know it. I actually talked to Valkyrie a couple of times. Valkyrie talked back. It was really, I wasn't drinking or anything. Yeah, but that is groundbreaking technology that people don't see. It's in the background, but then it starts to make a difference. And next thing you know, you find that Amazon's got a robotics company, and they're moving. They didn't move out to Western Mass. They didn't move down south. They moved up into the Route 93, Route 3 corridor. Those kinds of companies. We've gotten some new companies up at Cross River Center, our project up north. So that area, those kind of projects, that's where you really want to focus on, because that's what's going to create that momentum. And it all of a sudden surprises you, and you go, oh my God, where'd this come from? And, Verizon pays $70.
Well, I could not place a better ad than that, so I know when to stop. John, thank you for that. Let's hear it for this panel, right? They were a great panel. You guys did a great job. Ladies, thank you.